who I thank greatly for agreeing to put this on for us. So,
Thank you,
David.
Claire. And welcome, everyone. It's great to see everyone here tonight. I'm just going to start sharing my screen so I can show you my presentation. Just give me 1 minute. Now, what are you seeing now? Are you seeing a single slide, or are you seeing the like presenter view screen?
I see a single slide.
All right, we got it right. All right, I've just got to get back to the beginning. Sorry about this. I will not be going through this at the same speed. All right, there we are, back to the beginning. So welcome, everyone. It's great to see everyone here. And thank you to the Westwood, Walpole, and Dedham League of Women Voters, who, as Claire has said, has arranged this evening and has done an incredible job of spreading the word on this essential topic. And Claire Galkowski is has orchestrated the whole thing. She's going to be the MC tonight, so she's going to be feeding me questions from the chat box. So if you have questions as we go along, there's going to be 4 breaks in the presentation after each of the major sections. And if you've got questions on, say, heat pumps, I'll take 2 or 3 questions from the chat box then. But then I'm going to try to keep going, otherwise we won't get through the whole thing in the time we've got. And then at the end, we'll open up for live questions, and I'll stay on as long as it takes for everyone to get their questions answered. Now, I'm going to be speaking this evening mostly about our own experience cutting our home's carbon footprint to 0 and making a 15% return on investment by doing so. That's right, you heard me correctly. You now get paid to cut your carbon footprint. Years ago, it cost a lot of money. It was very expensive to do so, but now things have changed. It's you now make money by cutting your carbon footprint. This is disruptive, to use the language of business. It's an inflection point. We're entering a new era, and this is the point of no return. So welcome to the future, everyone. It's a zero carbon future. As I mentioned, we'll be taking questions from the Q&A, so just use that chat function down at the bottom. Just click on it and type in a question, and then Claire will pass those questions on to me. So this is what happened on our house. This is the carbon footprint of our house. It started at about 30 to 35 tons per year back in the early days. And then at the end of 2016, we added heat pumps to replace our air conditioning units. And they supplement our furnace and do most of the heating work in the house, as well as the cooling work in the summertime as well. And we added solar panels to the roof of our house, and that cut our carbon footprint by about 2/3, by about 20 tons of carbon dioxide in 2017. And then at the end of 2017, I added insulation to the ceiling of the basement. I actually did that myself. And then we hired a contractor to install triple glazed windows, which were to replace our ancient, original with the house, 1974 double glazed windows and some single glazed windows that were literally falling apart. There was a 1-inch gap between the window and the frame for one of those windows. And that cut our carbon footprint a further 50%, making it about 5 tons. And at this point, I thought, well, this has been far more successful than I ever imagined, cutting our carbon footprint almost to 0. I thought, well, if we push this a bit further, we might actually get it to 0, and that would be kind of cool. So I added an additional solar panel array over the roof of our garage in the middle of 2018. And so for the full year of 2019, we actually had a 0 carbon footprint. And in fact, it was slightly negative because we were exporting more solar power to the grid than we were using than the carbon footprint caused by the very small amount of heating oil that we still burn to heat the house on those bitterly cold winter days. Now, 35 tons per year of carbon dioxide is about equivalent to taking 10 cars off the road. So 1 house, 10 cars. This is huge. Cutting carbon also cuts emissions of sulfur dioxide, nitric oxides, and particulates, better known as soot, all of which cause asthma. This is important. A recent Harvard University study estimates that more than 8 million people died last year as a result of fossil fuel pollution, from strokes to cancer, nearly double the number previously thought, and accounting for nearly 1 in 5 deaths. This is stunning what fossil fuels are doing to us. They are literally killing us. Now, what was even more of a surprise than cutting my carbon footprint to zero was that I'm saving $11,000 a year on heating and electricity. And that saving is earning me a 15% return on my investments. That's 15% after tax, and it's indexed for inflation, so it's much better than my 401k. So let me show you what the heating bills. This is what happened to our heating bills. The previous chart was the carbon footprint, very similar, about $11,000 in the early years, and then with the heat pumps and the solar panels cutting it by 2/3 in 2017, again by almost half in 2018, and again it went to slightly negative in 2019 because of the value of the solar electricity I'm exporting to the grid and getting a credit for now exceeds the amount of money I pay for that small amount of heating oil. So that's 35 tons gone each year, every year, and forever. And $11,000 in my back pocket each year, every year, and forever. And that 15% return on investment is forever as well. Now, you may be wondering, as Claire mentioned, I live in Dover. Dover is a very wealthy suburb. I have a big house. Is this going to work for me? And the answer is yes. I have one homeowner who I've been helping to cut his carbon footprint, and he is earning a much better return on investment than I am. He's earning a 46% per year return on investment, and he's cut his carbon footprint 38%. Now, this man lives alone in a small house, about 1,000 square feet, on a small income. So this approach works on all houses at all income levels. So this is big, it's transformative. This delivers the triple bottom line for the people, because you can cut out asthma, for the planet, you can cut out global warming, and you can cut out the pollution. The profit for your own back pocket, making money rather than paying money on electricity and for fuel bills. So this webinar is going to show you how we did it. Claire, I can see one person in the waiting room. Maybe you can submit them. So a bit of background. Claire gave you a bit of introduction. I have a degree in physics from Oxford University. I'm a Brit, if you can't tell by my accent. I have an MBA from Harvard Business School, and that's why I came to the States and met this girl and fell in love and been here ever since. And in my career, I founded and I was the CEO of 2 different biotechnology companies. I took both of those companies public. So I say all of this just to let you know that I have both the scientific understanding from physics to understand things like the low temperature performance of heat pumps and the low E coatings on triple glazed windows. I actually understand these things. And then the financial investment experience to understand things like return on investment and the net present value and other things that people use to evaluate investments. Like all of these things are, you spend something up front, you get some benefit in terms of savings into the future. Now, what happened, unfortunately, I was in a very nasty road accident in the summer of 2014. It nearly killed me. And it was while I was at home recovering from that accident that I did the research on cutting my own family's carbon footprint. Now, both my house and my swimming pool have 0 carbon footprints. I'm saving over $11,000 a year on the house and $3,000 on the pool. I wrote one book about each: 0 carbon home, 0 carbon pool. And I do not work for or get paid by any supplier of equipment. I'm not trying to sell you anything tonight. And I have no financial conflicts of interest other than selling the book. But everyone here is going to get that book for free. At the end, I'll give you the code. You can get it for free from my website, either for iPad or Kindle, whichever you prefer. And I do consult to homeowners who've asked me to help them going 0, but only get paid on results. So even that's not really a conflict of interest. And my advice this evening is based on my experience, but neither me nor the company is giving investment, tax, legal, or financial advice, nor providing any kind of guaranteed results. Now, I'm not going to tell you this evening that you need to eat vegetarian. If you do eat vegetarian, that's great. I'm not against it at all. I'm mostly vegetarian myself. But I'm not going to tell you that that's what you need to do. I'm not going to tell you you need to turn down your thermostat. I'm not going to tell you to wear a cardigan like Jimmy Carter did. I'm not going to tell you to bike to work, have fewer children, or even vote for Al Gore. In fact, I'm not going to tell you who to vote for at all. I really don't care who you vote for. I don't care if you think climate change is a Chinese hoax or if you think it's an existential threat to humanity. We're just going to focus on saving money. And that's something we can all agree on, nonpartisan, as Claire was saying in the introduction at the start. And it is complete coincidence, or you might consider it destiny. Our family name really is Green. I got it from my father. I'm not making it up, just like I'm not making up anything else in this presentation. So how is the data gathered? You'll see there's a lot of data in this presentation on what happened to cut our carbon footprint and what happened in terms of investment and return. It was basically from our house. And our house is a standard 2-story construction, wood frame, New England construction. It's bigger than average, about 5,400 square feet. It was built in 1974, and it just has standard walls with 4-inch cavities filled with fiberglass. And now, before we went zero, it had no energy efficiency features whatsoever. In fact, it was pretty energy inefficient as a house. And we live in Dover, as I mentioned, which has 5,800 heating degree days. Because this is Zoom, I get people from all over the world on these calls. And I'm sure there are people on the call this evening from, say, California or South Carolina. And so heating degree days allow you to measure how cold it gets in the wintertime. And 5,800 is about as cold as it gets across New England, through the Midwest, and even all the way across to Northern California. Now, what I did is each day for 2 years, I measured the heating oil used in our house and the electricity. And then I used that. This is the kind of sort of super geek I really am. I actually enjoy spreadsheets and stuff and doing the kind of analysis you need to do to get to the bottom of these kind of problems. And I used that data to build an energy model of our home, just based on the laws of physics, how energy flows into a house, how energy flows out of a house. And that model came up with an 80% R squared. R squared is a statistical measure for how good a model is, how good at predicting the outcome it is. And 80% is very good for a model like this. It projected that's daily. It projected my full year bills for the year within about 10%. Now, this was the Gen 1 version of the model. I'm currently on Gen 5. This model has been greatly improved over the years, and that now predicts my bills within about 5%. And I use that energy model to make financial projections using standard discounted cash flow analysis. This is taught in every business school in the world. It's certainly taught at Harvard Business School, using terms like net present value, which is basically the profit you make on the investment. IRR is the internal rate of return, which means like a return on investment, like maybe 5% a year or 10% a year. And the payback period is how long it takes for the savings to pay for the cost of the investment up front. And I measured the cut in energy and the cut in dollars for each one of the Fab Four. That's heat pumps, insulation, triple glazed windows, and solar panels, as we added each one of them. And I've used a very similar method for our rental property, which we have in Dover, which I'll show you as well, and for consulting clients. So you may be asking, why now? This is kind of odd to having this conversation. We've been talking about this for 40 years now. Well, I think it's very simple. The technologies involved, like for insulation, for heat pumps, solar panels, and triple glazed windows, have all got substantially better in even the last few years. And the subsidies from government are very significant. So you can, by following these examples, cut the carbon emissions from your home to zero, save thousands of dollars a year on heating and electricity bills, and make a good return on your investment. We have done it. And just in case you're interested, this works on new houses too. I'm working with developers and architects now to develop new houses that will also have a zero carbon footprint and zero utility bills. But most of my work this evening, most of my talk this evening is going to be on existing houses and what you can do with existing houses, not on new construction. So how did we cut our carbon footprint to zero? We installed the Fab Four. That would be heat pumps, insulation, triple glazed windows, and solar panels. It's easy to remember this because the real Fab Four, that would be the Beatles, had lots of hits: HITS, heat pumps, insulation, triple glazed windows, and solar panels. So how do we go zero and make money? We installed the Fab Four, and we got all the tax breaks and subsidies. So I'm going to do this one by one, and then at the end of each section, I'll take a couple of questions from the chat box via Claire, and then at the end, we'll open it up for live questions and answers. And I said I'll stay on as long as it takes to get everybody's questions answered. So these are the results for our heat pumps. This was the biggest single contributor to cutting our carbon footprint, almost cut it in half, saving us about $3,000 a year. And the total investment was about $26,000, paying for itself in about 9 years. That's a return on investment of about 9%, and that's 9% after tax. So to compare this to a stock market or bond market investment, which is taxable income, you'd be looking at an investment of maybe 12% or 15% or even 18% equivalent. This is clearly a very good return on investment compared to investing in the stock market. Now, in addition to that, an article published in Nature Energy, which is one of the most important academic journals in the energy field, just last year, showed that by comparing houses to similar houses with heat pumps, some with, some without heat pumps, they could get the price premium for having a heat pump. And it turns out that is about 4 to 7%. Now, this is often more than the cost of installing a heat pump, which means you no longer have to wait that 9-year payback period to get your money back from installing a heat pump. You can get it back as soon as you sell your house. So this is a picture of our heat pumps. And if you're thinking, well, they look just like our air conditioning units, you're right, they do. And they do air condition as well. These cool my house in the summertime, but in the wintertime, the circuit is reversed. And instead of pumping heat out of the house, they pump heat into the house. I'll show you why, show you how in a minute. Now, when they're in that heating mode, they heat with 2.5 times the efficiency of a furnace or a boiler. Doesn't matter if the furnace is natural gas or heating oil or propane, heat pumps are 2.5 times as efficient. Now they cool with the same efficiency as an AC unit. There's no benefit there, but it's when they're heating that the magic kicks in, and you get that 2.5 times benefit compared to burning a fossil fuel. So let me just explain how heat pumps work. This is sometimes quite confusing to people, but it really does not need to be confusing, because actually everyone is very familiar with heat pumps, because your refrigerator is a heat pump. What your refrigerator does is it moves the heat from inside the refrigerator to outside, where the kitchen is. And if you put your hand down the back of the refrigerator, you'll find it's warm. That warmth is the heat that was in your milk. It was removed from your milk, cooling your milk down, and dumped out the back of the fridge and dispersed to the kitchen air by that long coil of black metal pipes at the back of the fridge. And that's how heat pump works, to transfer heat from one place, the inside of your refrigerator, to the back of the fridge and to the kitchen air. Now, imagine that on a larger scale. This is the same thing on the scale of your house. This is what we call an air conditioning unit. It's the same physics, it's the same machinery, and it's cooling down the inside of the house and dumping the heat outside the house over that outdoor unit. So if you were to put your hand over that outdoor unit in the summertime, you'll find it's hot. It might be 70, 75 degrees inside the house because you've cooled it down to that temperature, but over the condenser unit of the air conditioning unit outside, it may be 110 degrees. It's really hot, because that is the heat that was in your house that's been moved outside of your house by the heat pump, and that heat is then dispersed to the outside air. That's how the heat pump here, known as an air conditioning unit, is used to cool your house in the summertime. Now in the winter time, just imagine reversing that circuit, and instead of cooling your house down, it cools down the outside air, making it colder still, and putting that heat into the house. This is a heat pump working in the wintertime to heat your house up. So this only works because it cools down the outside air. This is a little bit counterintuitive, because the outside air is already cold. So if it's cold, people think, well, how can there be heat in it? Well, there is a lot of heat in it, and you can remove it, but only by cooling down still further that outside air. So if you look at this picture here, that's me on the left with an infrared thermometer, and I'm measuring the temperature of the air going into the heat pump in the wintertime. You can see it's a very cold winter's day. It's 4.7 degrees Fahrenheit, very, very cold. And you can see there's snow on the ground. I'm wearing skiing gloves. Now on the right-hand side, you can see that I'm measuring the temperature on the outlet side, that's above the heat pump, and you can see it's a stunning minus 19.6 degrees Fahrenheit, unbelievably cold. And in fact, if it's so cold, if you were to put your hand over this, you would get frostbite. So that's how you can see the air, even though it's cold, is being cooled down further still by the heat pump, and taking the heat from that air and pushing it into the house, making the house warmer on the inside. This is how heat pumps work to heat your house in the wintertime. Now that was a ducted system. So our house has ductwork that already existed prior to putting in those heat pump units. And this is now showing our rental property in Dover, which has did not have any air conditioning at all. And so we fitted air conditioning, but not by adding ductwork, which would be very expensive on an existing house. We added it with a what's called a ductless mini split heat pump unit. You can see the outside unit here on the left, and the inside, you can see it's a ceiling mounted unit. These are often mounted on the walls or sometimes on the floor. I paid extra to have these ceiling mounted units because I think they look nicer, but it's as simple as that. You can get them to mount on the wall, or to mount on the floor, or to mount in the ceiling. So this is the last slide for heat pumps, and we'll take a few questions from the chat box. So please email them, or just send them in the chat function to Claire. But for details, you can read all about this in chapter 2 in Zero Carbon Home, which you'll all be getting for free at the end of this webinar. I do not recommend geothermal. Geothermal is sometimes known as ground sourced heat pumps. The heat pumps I was describing are air sourced. They take their heat from the air outside. Geothermal will cut your carbon footprint, no doubt, but they're too expensive compared to air source heat pumps. We had a quote for geothermal on our house. It was $98,000 compared to the air source heat pumps at 25. So 4 times the cost. Even though they are somewhat more efficient, they're not more efficient enough to compensate for the high upfront cost. And now air source heat pumps, I mentioned we have at our house, we have ductwork to circulate the air, so it's a forced hot air system. At our rental property, we have those ceiling mounted units which circulate warm air around the house. If you don't have that, if you have radiators and forced hot water, you can still get a heat pump to heat the water going around the radiators. It's just from a different manufacturer, that's all. And they will also work for swimming pools. I have a heat pump for my swimming pool. It greatly cut down, in fact, it cut down to 0 the amount of propane we've been using to heat the swimming pool. And also for your hot water tank, you can now separate your hot water tank from your heating the air system, from your furnace. And heat pump hot water tanks are much more efficient than fossil fuel heated hot water tanks. They also have a very nice side benefit, which is that they dehumidify the basement. Everybody's basement gets damp. Either there's leaks or humidity or condensation forming in the basement. So having this side benefit of dehumidifying the air in the basement is a big advantage. So, and I always recommend you leave your furnace in place, because most heat pumps cannot keep a house in New England at 70 degrees in the middle of wintertime if it's less than about 20 degrees Fahrenheit outside. And we do get colder than 20 degrees on about 20 days a year here in Dover. So leave your furnace in place, and you'll just start using it on those 20 or 30 days when the heat pumps can't keep up. So let's just pause here, Claire, and see if there's any questions from the chat function.
Hello, well, thank you, David. Yes, we have a couple of questions, and I'd also like to just make a quick comment. There were some nasty comments put in that were attributed to my friend Marcia, and we've been in a flurry of wondering how that happened. Marcia does not use that kind of language, so we must have some kind of technological issue going on. So apologies if anyone was offended by that. All right, here are a couple of questions. How did you manage to measure daily usage of heating oil?
So I just have normal tanks, 300-gallon tanks of heating oil, and they have a floating gauge on the top. And what I found is by carefully calibrating that gauge, I could measure the usage of oil in my house down to about 4 gallons. That was about as accurate as I could get it. And that was enough so I could measure it daily during the heart of the wintertime when it was really cold. And during the shoulder seasons, I might have to average it over 5 days, sometimes even 10 days to get it for that period. But that's how I did it. I just measured it off the gauge on the oil tanks. And for electricity, I just measured it off the meter.
Okay, thank you. And we also have a question. What is a heat pump? I think you gave a little bit of information on that. This could be a 2-semester course, but can you give us a quick rundown on what a heat pump is and does?
Yeah, so just imagine this. I'll try to use an analogy to make this a little easier to understand. So a heat pump is very much like a water pump. So a water pump does not create water, it just moves the water. So if you're using a water pump to move, say you've got a flooded basement, and you use a water pump to pump the water out of the basement and just dump it into the backyard somewhere, you're moving the water from one place to another. You're not creating water, you're just moving it from one place to another place. So you make one place drier, your basement gets drier, one place wetter, your backyard gets wetter. A heat pump is the same thing. It moves heat from one place to another. It does not create heat in the way that a fossil fuel furnace does, and it does not create heat in the way that an electric fan heater does or an electric baseboard radiator does. It moves heat from one place to the other. Just like the water pump moves water from your flooded basement to your backyard, the heat pump moves heat, which is energy, from one place, maybe the inside of your refrigerator, so it's removing the heat from your milk, to the back of the refrigerator in the kitchen. That heat pump, when it's your air conditioning unit in the summertime, is moving heat from the inside of the house, making the inside colder, to the outside of the house, making the outside air hotter. The same thing happens in the wintertime. If you just reverse the circuit, you now make the outside air colder, and you move that heat into the house. And this is why it can be 2.5 times as efficient as directly using electric resistance heating, like a portable fan heater, a space heater, or electric resistance baseboard heating.
Excellent. Thank you. That wasn't 2 semesters. Do you have time for one more question?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, what happens to the heat pump if the power goes out? Do you have a backup generator?
So very good question, because we're sort of in transition. So we have had a backup generator in the past, and the backup generator could not generate enough power to power the heat pumps directly, because now you're using electricity to heat your house. Even if it's with that 2.5 times efficiency, you're still using electricity, not burning a fossil fuel like oil or natural gas. So when the electricity goes off, my backup generator does not have enough power to power the heat pumps directly, but it does have enough power to power the oil burner circuit. So, so during a power outage, if I need heat, I'm actually using the fossil fuel furnace. And I have enough electricity from the backup generator to run a few lights, the fridge, a couple of sockets, and the oil burner circuit and the well water pump circuit, things like that. The emergency circuit is all on that generator. Now, my generator actually gave up the ghost about 3 or 4 years ago now. I'm in the process of getting a battery backup system, which will replace the generator during power outages. But the magic trick with a battery is you can recharge it from your solar panels. So I can go much longer during a power outage. Well, I will be able to go much longer during a power outage using my solar panels to power my battery than I would have been able to do with my fossil fuel generator.
Great. And I should ask you one more because I skipped it. This should be quick. How much for a heat pump hot water heater?
Sorry, Claire, say it again. How much money to
I
buy?
assume, how much does it cost? I
Yeah.
assume. Heat pump.
So they're about $1,000 to $1,500. They're sometimes called hybrid systems. They're not actually called heat pump systems because they have a heat pump and they always have electric resistance elements as the backup should you use all the water very quickly if you've got 3 teenage kids in the house or something like that. So they're usually called hybrid units. You can buy them at Home Depot or Lowe's. You can get like a 50-gallon tank for I think $1,200 or $1,300. They do have subsidies for them. Excuse me. The current subsidy is about $600, so it's a very large proportion of the cost of buying it. And in addition to that direct subsidy, you can actually buy them with a 0% interest loan called the heat loan, sponsored by the state of Massachusetts. So you don't even need to shell out the $600 up front. You can borrow it. It's a 7-year, 0% interest loan. It will almost certainly pay for itself before the 7 years is up.
Very good. Thank you. Well, I don't see any more questions in the chat, so maybe we should move on to the next section.
Yeah, let's keep going. So the second section after heat pumps is HITS. It's the insulation in your house. So insulation had a big effect. It cut our carbon footprint about 16%, or 7 tons of carbon dioxide. Now these tables, by the way, are all in the book. You don't need to write this down or take screenshots. They're all in the book, which you'll all get for free at the end. And also, if you want to download these slides, you can download them from my website, which I'll give you the address of at the end. And you can just download the slides as a PDF file if you want to. It costs about $1,000 for the installation. I just bought it from a local supplier, Hopkinton Lumber in Hopkinton, and it paid for itself in just a few months, with a return on investment of over 100% after tax. So this is the best return on investment I've ever made. I wish I could invest more of my 401k in insulation. And that client I mentioned was making a 46% return on investment by cutting his carbon footprint 38%. He focused mostly on insulation, air sealing, and something I'll show you a little bit later, fit from the inside triple glazed windows, which he actually made himself according to a recipe that I'd created for him. And this often pays for itself in the first winter. You will do far more to save the planet from global warming by insulating the ceiling of your basement than by buying an electric vehicle. An electric vehicle will save you about 2 tons of carbon dioxide emissions per year going from gasoline to electric, but insulation will save, in our case, 7 tons, and it only cost us $1,000, and Mass Save will pay for most of this. So you don't even need to shell out the $1,000. People who I know have recently used Mass Save have been getting installation work of several $1,000s worth of work done for free. And of course, the electric vehicle will cost you $50,000 or something like that, but the installation cost me $1,000, and it could even be free for you if you're using MassSave. So this is what we did on our house. We have a flat roof, not a sloped roof, and you can see here the insulation on the roof. There's 10 inches of fiberglass. That's about R30. Insulation is measured in R values, and more is better. Plus 2 ISO boards. You can see those yellowish foam boards on the top. This is basically spray foam in a board. You can just nail it down to the rafters. It's very easy to install. And that 4 inches is about R20, so a total of R50, which is a very well insulated roof. On the right-hand side, you can see the ceiling of our basement, where I installed the fiberglass. I just pushed it up in between the rafters there. It stays by itself. It just is squished in between the rafters, so it just sticks there. I put 12 inches in, that's about R38. This is what I bought from Hopkinton Lumber. They actually deliver, which is very nice. And it cost me about $1,000 and cut out most of the heat leaking from the house down to the basement. That made the basement colder. It made the basement about 8 degrees Fahrenheit colder because I'd now insulated the ceiling of the basement, which is totally fine because our basement is not living space. Our basement is storage space. If you have living space, you do not want to insulate the ceiling. You want to insulate the walls and the floor, which is a bit trickier. You may want to hire a contractor to do that, but adding insulation to the ceiling is very easy. I did this myself. There's 3 main types of insulation. On the left, in the attic, you can see blown-in cellulose. This is very popular. MassSave does a lot of this. It's literally blown in through like a hose pipe into the attic space. It's basically shredded newspaper, and it just traps a layer of air, and is about R3 per inch, the same as fiberglass, which everyone's familiar with, the pink stuff. And on the right-hand side is spray foam, which is sprayed in between the rafters, the slope part of the roof like this. It's sticky, it kind of glues itself to the rafters, and so it supports itself up there. Now, it's not the cellulose in blown-in cellulose, it's not the glass in fiberglass, and it's not the plastic in spray foam that insulates. It's the air. Air is a great insulator, and trapping air, I just like putting on a big coat in the wintertime, keeps the heat inside, and keeps the heat inside your house as well. Now, one thing that people often don't understand is insulation is just as important on hot summer days as it is on cold winter days. Insulation stops the heat from escaping in the wintertime, and it stops the heat from getting in the summertime. So using more insulation actually reduces your electricity bill in the summertime because of the need for less air conditioning, as well as saving on the heating bill in the wintertime. Now, let me just talk a bit about air sealing. This is basically blocking drafts in the house. Most clients need air sealing. Our house did not need a lot because it's a very airtight construction, mostly because it has a flat roof, and the flat roof has a rubber membrane, which is airtight as well as watertight. So air sealing can cut your energy use by almost a quarter. This is the experience many of my clients have had. Many of my clients have typical shiplap, overlap siding, or cedar shingles or shakes, and those are very leaky, very drafty, and an average house can lose up to 30% of its heat through the gaps and cracks in those walls. And a major academic study found that insulating the attic in row houses cut the energy use 8%, but insulating and air sealing cut it 18%. So most houses are going to need air sealing and insulation, just our house did not. So I definitely recommend that you do air sealing at the same time as you do insulation. Most MassSave contractors will do both at the same time. They'll come and do the installation for you and do the draft sealing. So MassSave is a great program. You should really be taking advantage of it. By the way, you're paying for it whether you use it or not, because you're paying for it through a surcharge on your electricity bill. So you're paying for it whether you're using it or not. So you should definitely be using it because it's your money. And MassSave, I mentioned, this is actually out of date. They used to pay 75% of the cost up to $2,000. They now pay 100% of the cost up to $2,000. So please go out and get your houses insulated and ask them to do the air sealing too. This is a picture of peaches on my peach trees in the summertime. You can see they're so ripe, they're weighing down the branches almost to the ground. You can see the grass there. This is the lowest hanging, ripest fruit in the zero carbon garden. So please pick it by the bushel. MassSave, by the way, will pay for both basement and attic insulation. Sometimes you have to prod them. They tend to want to get in and get out as fast as possible, and they'll just put spray foam, spray foam, they'll put blown in cellulose in your attic, but they will do the basement as well. Just make sure you point them towards doing that. Now, for details of which types to put where, just see this in the book. You'll all get this at the end of the call. If you're not living in Massachusetts, please go to this website called dsireusa.org, where incentives for insulation are listed state by state. So if you live in Arizona or California and you're on the call tonight, please go there to find out what the incentives are in your state. Now, I do not recommend taking off your siding, thickening the walls with insulation, and replacing the siding. This is actually quite popular in the deep energy retrofit or zero carbon community. It will cut your carbon footprint, just like geothermal will cut your carbon footprint, but just like geothermal, it's too expensive compared to insulating your attic and basement. So walls are often a bridge too far. There are occasions when you can insulate your walls. Those are written up in a separate little mini book I wrote called the Special Edition COVID-19 Stuck at Home Edition. There's four ideas in there that you can do while you're stuck at home because of COVID that are cheap, easy, and very effective. You can get that for free as well. I'll give you the code at the end of the presentation. I think the code is just COVID-19, COVID-19, no spaces. And there are times when you can opportunistically insulate walls, but generally speaking, it's very hard to do in a cost-efficient manner. So you're much better off insulating the attic and the basement and just accepting what you've got in your walls. So let's just pause here, Claire, and take a couple of questions on insulation, and then we'll move on so we don't drag out the time.
Okay, well, I don't see any questions about insulation yet. We did get another question in about heat pumps. Look at the three dots. Yes, I did that. So would you like me to read you another leftover heat pump question?
Sure, let's do that question, then we'll move on. Yeah.
Okay. Heat pumps are electric. How do electric heat pumps compare to Navian units, for example, which are fed by natural gas? In my experience, the Navians fed by gas are significantly more efficient and result in better savings than an electric system. Do you know about that, David?
I do not. So could I just ask that whoever asked that question, please send me a message in the chat or send me an email. I'll give you my email address at the end of the presentation because I've not heard of those systems and I'd like to understand how they work.
Okay, and let's see. Oh yes, okay. And we have a question. What is air sealing? Is it the same as duct sealing?
So no, it is not. That's a thank you for the clarifying question. So air sealing refers to sealing gaps and cracks in the house. In the if you have a concrete basement, which most houses do, then the wood framing of the house sits on that concrete basement, and that where the two sit is called the sill plate, and that's often very drafty. If you go into your basement in the wintertime, when the heating is on and it's a cold day out, you'll almost always feel a cold draft coming in across that the sill at the top of the concrete part of the basement because it's not sealed. You can get a couple of cans of spray foam from the local hardware store and just spray into those gaps and cracks and block the cold air from being sucked into the house that way. I found several holes in our basement like this. There was one was about 1 foot square. You couldn't see daylight on the other side, but obviously connected through to like an overhang space, and it was the air was being sucked in through that. So I just sealed it up with a piece of spare fiberglass and then coated the fiberglass with spray foam, and it just blocked the wind from coming in there. I also had a couple of holes that had been drilled through the concrete, above grade, but drilled through the concrete, probably for electrical runs at some point, but there was nothing in them except for mice. Mice found it very convenient to get in and out through the holes that had been drilled there for them. So I just took a can of spray foam and just filled the hole. Very easy, in fact, it's kind of fun to do, and very effective. So that is what I refer to as air sealing. That's in the basement. You can also do air sealing in the attic, and if you get a massive contractor, they will go around and put spray foam around the edges of the attic and seal the holes and the drafts in the attic and in the basement. Very good value for money, will save you a lot of money. That is different to sealing the ductwork. I suppose you could call it air sealing, but it's really a different thing. Ductwork also leaks. So if you've got nice warm air coming from your furnace or your heat pumps, through your ductwork, it's leaking out because the ductwork is not sealed. And you can buy a product called AeroSeal that is blown in through your ductwork, and it sort of sticks to the holes where the air is leaking out and seals them up. We did not use that at our house. I just used aluminium foil tape. You can buy it at any hardware store. It's usually right next to the duct tape. Do not, by the way, use duct tape. Do not seal ducts with duct tape. I know it sounds wrong, but duct tape is terrible. It always dries up over time, and it curls up and falls off, and you get bits of glue everywhere. It is the wrong product for sealing ducts. I don't know why it's called duct tape. Buy the aluminium tape with shiny foil stuff that's in the bin next to the duct tape at the hardware store. That stuff sticks like glue to the metal of the ducts, and you can just wrap it around, and it forms a perfect seal. It's cheap, very easy to do. I sealed my ducts, sealed all the leaks to put it over holes and gaps and around where the two bits of ductwork join together. And that increased the temperature of the air coming through the vents into the bedrooms, particularly the bedrooms upstairs, which are at the end of the heating duct runs, and had the longest time for the air to cool down on the way up there. So I insulated my ductwork and air sealed it, and the temperature of the air in the rooms went up between 5 and 10 degrees Fahrenheit. It was a very noticeable change to my kids who were in those bedrooms doing their homework at night. They were now getting much warmer air coming into their bedrooms than they had before. So I definitely recommend doing air sealing of ductwork, but I wouldn't use that AeroSeal product. I would just go around with a roll of aluminium tape.
Great. Okay, we have another question and a comment here. Why don't I do the comment?
Yep.
The comment is duct tape versus duck with a K tape. Duct with a T versus duck with a K. The former is the aluminum tape you were talking about, and the latter is this very sticky tape with the embedded mesh that we tend to think of as duct tape. So I've been educated. I did not know that.
Yep. So
Thank
duct tape is a brand name. It's like a trademark, but it is commonly referred to as duct tape, or maybe people just aren't pronouncing it right. But I just don't want people to be making the mistake of buying the stuff they think is for ducts because it's called duct tape, when it isn't. It's not. It's designed for like wrapping up parcels or something, or taping wires to the ground at concerts. It's not designed for duct work. So just buy the aluminium tape. It's not much more expensive, and it works beautifully.
Okay, and we got one more. Does Mass Save pay for any type of insulation?
Not any type of insulation. So things like insulating the hot water pipes, which I also highly recommend. You can buy the long tubes of foam from Home Depot for like $2 for a 6-foot tube. A very good value for money for insulating the hot water, the copper hot water pipes in the basement. They won't pay for duct insulation, and they will often just try to come in, blown in cellulose into your attic, and then leave, because that's how they make the most money. But they will, if you ask them nicely or perhaps persuade them, insulate the ceiling of a basement too. I've never, oh no, actually I have seen them do walls as well. A client of mine lives in Westwood, and she had no insulation in her walls, and Mass Save paid to put blown-in cellulose into her walls. So yeah, so you should really exploit them as much as you can, because it is all free, or at least you've paid for it on your electric bill. So it's definitely worthwhile. And this client of mine who lives on Route 109 in Westwood, she has cut her heating bills certainly by thousands of dollars a year. We won't really know until the heating season is over, but probably by thousands of dollars a year. Her house is much warmer. She used to get cold spots in the corners because there was no insulation in the walls. It was unpleasant to be in her living room. It now is as pleasant to be anywhere in her house because of the insulation in the basement. The ceiling of the basement, the attic, and the walls were done all by Mass Save, and air sealing was done all by Mass Save. And because she lives on Route 109, it was pretty noisy. It's much quieter in her house now, so she could not be happier with the work she's done at her house.
Great. All right. Well, that's all I got. So
okay,
want to move on to the next section?
Let's carry on then. So T, the T in hits, triple glazed windows. So triple glazed windows cut about 5% of our carbon footprint and about 2 tons of carbon dioxide. saving us about $1,000 a year and cost us about $4,500. Now, this is not the full cost of triple glazed windows. Our windows were ancient and falling apart. I'll show you them in a few minutes. There were literally 1-inch gaps between the window and the frame. And so our decision was, do we replace our windows with double glazed windows, or do we replace them with triple glazed windows? And so this $1,000 is the additional cost, the incremental cost of replacing them with triple glazed windows rather than double glazed windows. The full cost of replacing windows is not going to pay back for decades on the energy bill. Savings windows are very expensive. But if you are in a situation where you need to replace your windows, then replacing them with triple glazed makes very good economic sense compared to replacing them with double glazed. If you've got perfectly good windows, do not rip them out. It's not worth it. There's something else I recommend there. You can actually add a panel of glass from the inside called a window insert that will make your window effectively a triple glazed window without having to spend the money to rip out your perfectly good double glazed windows. These pay for themselves in about 4 or 5 years with a return on investment of about 19% after tax. So these are our new triple glazed windows in the living room of our house. Let me just show you the old ones. Here are the old ones, the metal framed ones from the 1970s. You can see the panel on the left has completely missed it up. The one on the right is the one with the 1-inch gap. The house has just subsided a little bit, and this is actually a patio door. The patio door was no longer fitting into the frame, and there's a 1-inch gap with the wind coming through it, and I put duct tape over it. It's actually drafting tape in this case. So I hope you will agree with me that the old windows, or the new windows, look much better than the old windows, including being able to see out and see the garden, which we couldn't do with the old windows because they were all misted up and you couldn't even see the garden. Not only do new windows or new patio doors, like you see here, greatly reduce the carbon footprint and reduce the heating bills, they make the house much nicer to be in. These are our houses we're talking about. It's not just about bills and carbon footprint. How they live really matters. This is our living room. Our living room used to be too cold to have Christmas. We'd get cold drafts off the windows would be drafty, the wind would be blowing in. And it was just too cold. The heating system could not keep this room at a nice temperature in the middle of wintertime until we put the triple glazed windows in. And the ceiling of the basement underneath the living room here is now insulated with that fiberglass I just showed you. And now the living room is a very nice place to be all year round, even on the coldest winter days. And we had Christmas this year there, and it was really nice. So let me just explain what a triple glazed window is. A single glazed window is just a single pane of glass, just one sheet of glass. Double glazed, 2 sheets of glass with a 1/2-inch air gap between the two. That over doubles the insulation value of the window, halving the amount of heat lost and the dollars that are being lost through that window. If you have a triple glazed window, you have 3 panes of glass with 2 1/2-inch air gaps. Now, if you add a low E coating to the glass, which I'll explain in just a minute, a low E coating is a very, very thin coating of metal on the outside of the windows that reflects away the infrared light, which is heat, or the ultraviolet light, which is what fades your carpets, and it improves the insulation almost by 50%. So it is well worthwhile getting a low E triple glazed window, which is much more insulating than just a plain triple glazed window. And in addition, I would get the argon filling. You can often get these windows with either argon or with krypton. Krypton is too expensive. It's not worth the additional money, but argon is well worth it over getting just an air gap. And just remember, just like with the insulation I showed you earlier, it's the air that's doing the insulation, not the glass. And a double glazed window plus a storm window is not a triple glazed window. In order for it to really insulate, the air has to be sealed. The air has to not move. And so a triple glazed window where the draft can blow up the back of it is not a triple glazed window if you've got a storm window on the outside of a double glazed window. Here's me illustrating how triple glazed windows work. On the left there, that's me in a t-shirt. And that's really no insulation. It's got a little bit of ability to block the wind, but there's no insulation. It's just a single glazed window. Now, if I'm wearing that green sweater, I'm trapping about a 1/2 inch of air against my body. It's not the wool in a wool sweater that insulates, it's the air that the wool traps. Air is a very good insulator. If I had 2 air trapping layers, like the green sweater and the blue sweater, I'm now trapping 2 layers of air. That's like a triple glazed window because there's 2 layers of air being trapped. If I now wrap myself in one of those shiny foil space blankets, that's reflecting the infrared light or the heat back to my body. That's like a low E coating on a triple glazed window. I've got 2 layers of air plus that coating reflecting the infrared back to my body, keeping me nice and warm. So this is how triple glazed windows work, those 3 panes of glass in the middle with a coating on the outside and on the inside. So from the outside, you've got the light coming from the sun. Some of it is visible light, goes straight through the window, but the ultraviolet light is reflected away by that very thin and visible coating of metals that reflects the ultraviolet away, and that keeps your photographs from fading, it keeps your carpets from fading, and that's reflected away by a coating called a low E180 coating. These diagrams are all in the book, you don't have to remember it all. And if you're now on the inside of the house, and it's a cold winter's day, maybe 20 degrees outside, it may be 70 degrees inside, your body's at 98 degrees Fahrenheit, you are emitting energy, you're emitting infrared light, emitting heat. And that infrared light is reflected back into the room by a different metal coating called low E I89 that reflects the light back, keeping you and the room much warmer. So low E coatings have been studied by the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, and Lawrence Berkeley has determined that low E coatings on windows have saved Americans $150 billion on heating bills, which is not bad for something that's completely different, completely invisible. Now, that's if your windows are being replaced. You really want to replace them with low E triple glazed windows, not double glazed windows. But if your windows are in good shape, here's the better solution for you. This is upstairs at our rental property where we have single glazed windows in the sort of converted attic space. On the left, you see one which is a glass sheet in a frame that is just push fit into the window frame and adds a glass panel in addition to the single glazed window that was there before. Now, these are particularly good for double hung or single hung windows, which are notoriously drafty, because not only do these window inserts add insulation and the low E coatings to the glass, they also block the drafts. And that joint where the sash moves up and down is very, very hard to seal on a sash window. And so putting this window insert in from the inside gives you both an air seal and an insulation benefit as well. Now in the middle, you can see the picture is taken with an infrared camera. Infrared measures heat. Yellow in this picture is warmer, purple is colder. And you can just about read the temperature in the middle is about 63 degrees Fahrenheit. The room temperature is about 70 degrees. The outside temperature is about 40 degrees on this day. And on the right-hand side, you can see the same thing for my control window, which was a single glazed window without the window insert, about 40 degrees. So if you were sitting next to that 63-degree window, you'd be feeling warm. There'd be no cold draft to keep your feet cold, and your face would not be feeling cold because of the lack of radiation coming from the wall there. However, if you're sitting in front of that 40-degree window, your feet will be freezing cold because there'll be a cold draft off that window sweeping down to your feet, and there'll be no heat coming to your face from that window. So you'll be cold on your face and cold on your feet. So these things are very good value for money. They're only about $200. They pay for themselves in about 5 years, and the difference in the blocking the drafts and improving the comfort of the room is considerable. So for details on triple glazed windows, it's all in the book, including the zero interest loans. And if you're not in Massachusetts, you can visit this website where all the subsidies are listed state by state. Now, I do not recommend that stretchy plastic film. You've probably seen the stuff. You can buy it at any hardware store. You kind of tape it up with double-sided tape and then use a hairdryer to stretch it out flat. It does work. It definitely reduces the drafts and it improves the insulation. But when you come to take it off, I found the paint comes off with it, so leaving in fact that's a good. If only the paint comes off, that's good. What happened to me was much worse, and the plastic tape came off in my hand, leaving the strip of glue on the window frame. So I now have a nasty, sticky yellow strip of glue on my window frames that I cannot get off, and it's just collecting ants and flies and ladybugs that crawl across it and get stuck. So I do not recommend that stretchy plastic film. So let's just pause here, Claire, and take any questions on triple glazed windows.
All right, very good. That was very interesting. We only got one question so far, but maybe some will come in. Anne asks, who can replace large double pane skylights with triple pane?
So we had a large, actually single pane skylight, which we did replace with a large triple pane skylight. Ours was installed by a company called A&A, just like capital A, ampersand, capital A. And if you're interested, I can send you the contact information. Just send it to me in the either in the chat function or by email. I'll give you my email address at the end of the presentation. And they did a good job. I was very happy with them. Skylights are tricky, which means expensive to replace, because replacing them with triple glazed means they're heavy. And skylights need to be physically supported. If ours is sloped, ours is about a 45-degree angle, and so we had to actually put in aluminium rails to support the extra weight of the triple glazed window. So it was very expensive, not only to buy the window but also to get it installed. So skylights can be tricky. If the skylight's just flat on the roof, they're much cheaper to, or flat or sloped on the roof, they're much cheaper to install. But I've never seen a triple glazed skylight window like that. If you find one, let me know. Certainly when I replaced ours, we have some skylights on our roof, which are just flat glass. And in fact, ours were originally domed plastic skylights, and those are all removed and replaced with flat glass panels. Those are double glazed because we could not find decent ones. In fact, I couldn't find any that were triple glazed.
Very good. Thank you. Yes, skylights are definitely a challenge. Solar panels are probably a better a better deal. All right, I have a question about heat pumps, which I think I'll go back to. Let's stick with the windows for now.
Yeah.
Question from Marlena. I live in Phoenix, Arizona. Any suggestions for window solutions to decrease heat coming in? Home is only 12 years old, so I'm not getting new windows yet. What about films? Which are best?
So I've used films myself. They work very well. They don't last very long, but they are pretty good and they're very cheap. So if you've got a problem with overheating in the summertime, I would definitely try those films. You can buy them from most hardware stores like a Home Depot or a Lowe's, or you can get them online from Amazon. I would definitely try them. They come, I tried two. One was about, I think, 60 or 70% reflective, and one was about 70 or 80% reflective. They're cheap enough. I'll just buy a couple of different ones and try them out and see what you think. They're quite tricky to get smooth on the glass. You really need to get one of those like a windshield wiper kind of wipers to get all the bubbles out of them, which I was not able to do on mine. But if you can do it, I think they actually work pretty well. I know they work well. They definitely reflect the light and they reduce the heat gain, and they're cheap. So I definitely try those. If you want to go for something a little bit better, I would go for the glass version of that fit from the inside window insert. Only the glass ones can have a low E coating, because low E is a very high temperature process and it would melt plastic. You can buy those window inserts with plastic sheets like polycarbonate sheets or with glass sheets. I would definitely recommend the glass because you can get the low E coating. And even a modest low E coating will reduce the solar heat gain from that window, as well as keeping you warmer on the inside. So I would go for one of those two things, and I'll probably just try the window films first because they're so cheap. If you don't like it, go for something better. But I would try it because it's cheap and it is very effective. I don't really like the way it looks, but maybe if you're very careful and you get it right up to the edges and cut the edges with like a razor blade, and so you can't see the plain glass around the side of the darker area with the plastic film. I think you can do a better job than I did. I just kind of did it to try it out, but I still use them, so they're definitely good. They definitely work, but I'll just experiment with it before you do your whole house.
Okay, I just had a flash came to me. This reminded me a little bit of car talk with Click and Clack, the Tappet brothers. You got a brother?
I do. He lives in England.
Perfect. All right, here's a comment. I've seen triple layer polycarbonate skylights. Does polycarbonate maintain its transparency or does it get foggy? That's my question.
Um,
um,
yeah, so polycarbonate is the best of the plastics. Acrylic does tend to yellow over time, so I wouldn't recommend using acrylic, but polycarbonate is the same stuff that they use to make riot shields for police officers from. It's extremely strong. I think it's, I didn't realize you get a triple layer polycarbonate skylight, but that actually sounds like a good deal to me because it's much lighter than a glass triple panel. And the polycarbonate does last a long time without the kind of degradation. I won't say it has no degradation in color, but it doesn't go yellow in the way that the acrylic does.
okay, so you didn't know they were available then for
No, I
Saturday.
didn't. No, whoever said that, if you could just type into the chat the name of the manufacturer, I will look those up because that's a great sounding product. A triple layer
Yeah.
polycarbonate skylight, I think is a great idea.
Yeah, except you wouldn't be able to do the low E coating on it, I suppose.
Right, you wouldn't be able to do the low E coating, but for us, skylights are often not that big. We have an exception. We have a very large skylight, which is very expensive to install. But if you just got like a 2 foot square frame, you don't really need the low E coating because you're not going to be getting that much heat through the glass. So I think that the idea of having a lighter weight polycarbonate triple glazed panel is a very good idea.
Great. All right. Well, hopefully Valentina will enlighten us as to
Great.
where they were able to get it. All right. And one more window related one. I think we should probably go back to the heat pump one maybe at the end of the presentation. Should a window insert be added if the current window configuration is a single glaze window with a low E storm window?
Yeah, there's no problem with adding an insert to a existing single glazed window with an exterior storm window. No problem at all. So I would actually, I think that'd be a very good location for a an interior window insert because when you've got an outside storm window and you've got a sash window, it's almost certainly going to be drafty. So being able to put a something that blocks the draft as well as gives you extra insulation and the low E coating is going to be a big bonus for you and cut down on the heating bills, and probably even more than that, it's just going to improve the comfort of the room because you're probably getting cold drafts off that window in the wintertime.
Okay, very good. I'm thinking we should probably finish the presentation now and then go back to the heat pump question.
Sure, yeah, let me
What
just
do you
carry
think?
on, then we'll go back at the end.
Carry on.
Okay,
Okay,
let's
carry
go to the
on.
fourth part then. The fourth part of the HITS recipe, solar panels. So the solar panels were the second biggest impact on our carbon footprint, cutting it by about a third, about 14 tons, saving us the most money, over $5,000, but the biggest expenditure as well, $42,000 for the solar panels. They'll pay for themselves in about 7 years, about 13% return on investment. Now, in addition to that, all my calculations are based off the money savings and the money invested. But in addition to that, the Appraisal Journal, which is a big journal in this field, has estimated based off Census Bureau data on I think it's 49,000 houses in every state in the United States with every heating fuel, that the house price has increased by $111,000 from installing the solar panels alone. Now that's a empirical way of doing it, looking at real houses and what they're selling for, with and without solar panels. There's a theoretical way of doing it, which uses the same kind of discounted cash flow analysis I've done in all my calculations, but you can do it on a website. The website is called pvvalue.com, PV for photovoltaic or solar panels. And you can type in the size of your array and the amount of kilowatt hours it produces, and it will give you an estimate of the cash flow valuation, the net present value, and that was $105,000. So 105,000 theoretically, 111,000 empirically. That's a pretty good agreement to me. This is more than double our net investment in solar panels, and actually more than our net investment in all of the Fab Four. So the solar panels alone paid for by increasing our house price, the investment in all of these technologies, but that is on top of the money savings, which is illustrated in this chart here. So these are our solar panels taken from a picture from a drone above our house on our flat roof. Now, solar panels the way a solar panel works is actually very, very complicated and very fancy quantum physics, but you really don't care because the light from the sun just comes from one side and electricity pours out the other side. Now, the electricity coming from a solar panel is called DC, or direct current electricity, which is the same electricity as you get in a battery. It's also the same electricity used in your car, but your house uses a different type of electricity called AC, or alternating current. And so a box on the wall of your house converts the DC to the AC. That AC is fed to your meter, and the meter feeds your house. But you never lose that connection to the street. So this is not going off grid. Solar panels allow you to supplement the power from the grid, but they do not remove your connection to the grid. And in fact, when you put solar panels in, your utility company will come along and replace your old meter, which read the power only one way, coming from the street to your house, with a net meter, which reads it both ways. The amount you've consumed from the grid, less or net of the amount of power you've exported to the grid from your solar panels. Now, you will never be without power because of that grid connection. This is the daily production of electricity from our solar panels. You can see there's a huge day-to-day variation, sunny days, shady days, or cloudy days, huge summertime to wintertime variation, and I don't even show the day to nighttime variation, but our lights are always on. You can see the lights behind me. There's no sun out now, it's nighttime, because of that connection to the grid. So, so because of that connection, you'll always have light and heat, and of course the really important stuff like Netflix and Wi-Fi. And this net metering is completely invisible to you, except when you see the much lower electricity bills. So this is the finances of our array. The gross cost was $56,000. The federal tax credit, which was then 30%, is now 26%. So ours was about $17,000. Massachusetts gives you $1,000 tax credit as well. That's still $1,000 these days. Back then, the subsidy scheme was called SREC. It's now called SMART. SREC is a bit more generous than SMART is, but SMART's a lot easier to claim. So the net cost of our array was about $14,000, a huge reduction from the $56,000 we paid up front, and resulting in a cost per kilowatt hour of electricity of about 5 cents. That compares to Eversource or National Grid at about 23 or 24 cents. Huge reduction in the cost of electricity. My net present value, which is the total profit I make on this investment, is about $29,000, and the IRR, or return on investment, is about 14% per year. So this breaks even in about 7 years. And in addition to that, the Department of Energy study estimates our house prices increased $71,000 from something that cost me $14,000 net of the subsidies. Now, the new subsidy scheme in Massachusetts called SMART, stands for Solar Massachusetts, something or other. And I've recently bid out solar panel installations for a client of mine that came in the 4 to 6 cents per kilowatt hour range. So what was good value for money back in 2017 is even better value for money today. And you do not need to do these calculations yourself. If you just use a website called the Energy Sage website, which was started by the Department of Energy, it's now run by a private company, they will compare all the bids for you and do all these financial calculations, including the cost per kilowatt hour. So you don't need to do these calculations yourself. Because solar panels are now so cheap and so effective, even if you have a partly shaded roof, like I do, my garage roof is about 50% shade. My roof I showed you on the house is almost perfect sun, but the garage roof is about 50% shade because it has 100-foot tall pine trees only about 50 feet away on the southwest side. So that roof still produces electricity at about 11 cents per kilowatt hour, much more expensive than the 5 cents from the roof of my house, but 11 cents is still half the cost of electricity from Eversource. So even shady roofs can be extremely good at cutting your carbon footprint and your electricity cost. And I definitely recommend using that Energy Sage website, the National Renewable Energy Lab, which I mentioned earlier, with their studies on heat pumps. They've documented a 10 to 20% saving using the Energy Sage website compared to calling contractors one by one. Now for details, this is all in the book. The lease loan cash purchase options. Again, if you're outside Massachusetts, if you're in Phoenix, Arizona, for instance, go to desireusa.org. I do not recommend solar hot water panels. These are, again, quite common in the sort of zero carbon or green building community. This is where the sun's heat is used to heat up the water. The problem with these is they give you massive amounts of hot water in the summertime, right when you don't need it, and they give you no hot water in the wintertime, right when you do need it. So compared to having solar photovoltaic panels, which produce power all year round, even in the middle of winter, that are feeding a heat pump or water tank with its 4 times heating efficiency compared to a fossil fuel furnace, it is much better to have a few extra panels on your roof and have a heat pump or water tank as well as the heat pump for heating your house. Now, for batteries, if any of you are interested in batteries, batteries are a very new area. You now get a subsidy under the SMART scheme for a battery. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm replacing my backup generators with batteries because the subsidies are now so good on batteries that if you install them with an array, I wouldn't get a battery on its own, but if you install a battery with a solar panel array, the extra subsidy for the battery makes the battery almost free over its lifetime. So batteries are very good value for money right now because of the subsidies are so good. Let's just pause here, Claire, and get some questions on solar panels.
Great. All right, we have a couple of questions. Oh, we have a few questions. Okay. What are your thoughts on renting solar panels, like from a group like Trinity versus purchasing?
So there's two thoughts there really. If you rent them or lease them, it's generally less financially advantageous to you. In other words, it's more expensive. You're going to be paying more per kilowatt hour of electricity compared to owning the panels yourself. Owning the panels yourself is definitely the cheapest way to get solar electricity. However, if you don't have the credit rating to get a loan to buy them yourself, or you don't have the cash to buy them yourself, then using a lease or a rental agreement makes sense. So this is really something that is up to, it depends on your personal financial situation. If you don't have the cash to buy them yourself, and or you don't have the ability don't have the credit rating to get a loan to buy them, then renting or leasing them makes perfect sense. You will still get a cut in your electric bill. It just won't be as big as the cut if you pay for them yourself.
Excellent. Do you recommend any companies to buy solar panels from?
So I've used 3 different companies to install my arrays over the years, and I'm currently in negotiations with two companies for the arrays I'm about to install with the batteries. And the ones I would recommend out of those would be Great Sky Solar. They're doing the batteries for me right now. I would not recommend Solar Flare. They bid on the batteries, but they actually stopped installing batteries on December 31st last year, which was really inconvenient because it was right in the middle of me contracting with them to install the batteries. And then the other ones, I used New England Clean Energy, which did my first array. They were very good. I really liked them. They were a bit expensive, but they were very good. Then used a company called SGE, or Second Generation Energy. I would not use them. They put holes in my roof. We had leaks, all kinds of problems. Although they did a good job of cleaning up the mess they'd made, but how they managed to make that mess in the first place was a bit beyond me. Yeah, that's it. Those are all the companies I've used so far.
Okay, and we have had 2 separate solar projects at our house, and we used a company called Revolusun, and they were very good. They were very helpful. So I would recommend them as well. And there are other good companies too. Check the reviews, I would suggest.
Yeah, I'll definitely check the reviews. Also, if you do use the Energy Sage website, they do compare them side by side. So at least you get a very good apples to apples comparison of the costs, the net cost after the subsidies, the cost per kilowatt hour. What you don't get is that recommendation like Claire kind of talked about, or I talked about. And there, I think places like the League of Women Voters is actually the perfect place to be swapping stories. I mean, probably 20% of the people on the call tonight have got solar panels, or they've got a friend next door or a neighbor, or they've got a family member who's got them. So sharing those stories on who are the good guys who you would recommend to a neighbor compared to who are the bad guys you wouldn't recommend to a neighbor is very valuable.
Okay, yeah, and I think I will invite people who have had both good or bad experiences to type in the chat to everyone who you used and what you thought. I think that would be a
Yeah, very good
fun
idea.
thing to do. Okay, another question from Jerry. Is it problematic or risky if you have to angle the solar panels on the roof to maximize sunlight capture?
So two answers to your question, Jerry. If you've got a sloped roof, like a pitched roof like this, you don't have any choice. You have to have them sloped at the angle of the roof. They can't be sloped at a different angle to the roof. And that does increase the amount of electricity produced by the panel, but it's only about 10% compared to a flat roof. So the penalty of having the panel flat compared to having it at an angle is only about 10%. It's not really very material. But having them sloped does improve it. However, having them sloped on a flat roof is not worth it, because what would then happen is each one shades the next one. So you have to have the panels further apart, whereas when they're flat, they can be next to each other, and you actually get more production by having a flat array on a flat roof than you do by having tilted panels on a flat roof.
Huh, that is news to me. Well, thank you. Let's see, are there other questions? What happens if there's an issue with the roof, like a leak?
So let me just back up a bit. So if your roof is more than 15, if you've got asphalt shingles, say, which typically last 20, maybe 25 years, and you're up to 15, 20 years, I would replace the roof before putting solar panels on. Otherwise, you're going to have to take the panels off to replace the roof at a later date. And that's going to be more expensive. So if the roof is coming up on replacement, I would replace it before you put the solar panels on. If you've got a flat roof, I've put them on 2 flat roofs now. I would not recommend drilling through the flat rubber membrane and attaching them to the rafters. I've done that. It works, but I'm just concerned there'll be leaks at some point in the future. If you do it that way, I highly recommend getting an installer who gives you a roof penetration warranty. So separate from the solar panel warranty, you get a warranty on the roof. So if you're going to have a roof penetration on a flat roof, I would definitely go with someone who gives you a roof warranty. But the better way to install them on a flat roof is called a ballasted system, which basically means you weigh down the panels with concrete blocks. So the panel rests about 4 inches above the roof, but it's resting on a steel tray, and the tray is the rails at the end that the panel is screwed down to, and the panel is just weighted down with a couple of concrete blocks onto the roof. I've had no problems with this whatsoever. I think it's a much better arrangement for a flat roof. If you're doing a sloped roof, if you have standing seam metal roofs are perfect for solar panels because you can screw or clamp the panel to the seams. So there's no penetration of the metal roof at all. In fact, a metal roof with solar panels is really the perfect combination. If you have an asphalt shingle roof, then a sloped asphalt shingle roof, then you do need to penetrate through those asphalt shingles to the roof underneath. In which case, I would again recommend you get an installer who offers a roof penetration warranty. There is no problem with penetrating those asphalt shingles to the rafters to screw them on, but you need someone who does it properly. And what happened with Second Generation Energy, who did my garage array, is they didn't do it properly, and they put holes through the roof that they did not patch, and that led to roof leaks. And the good news is they did come back 3 times to fix my roof, and they've done a very good job of fixing the roof, but they should never have put those holes in the roof in the first place.
Right, and I know that at Westwood High School, we have solar panels on a flat roof, and they were just ballasted on, as you described.
Yeah, much better solution, I think.
Rails.
Yeah.
Is it true that the panels of the future will look like a traditional roof with tiles?
So you can, yeah. So Tesla makes their roof tile system, and they're not the only company. There's more than one company now making these roof tile systems. They do have their own problems, and the problem is mostly they're very expensive. There was recently an interview with a Tesla engineer, I think, who had put the solar tiles on a new house he had built in Silicon Valley somewhere, and he said his quote was, "They're great value for money. They cost 35% more than regular solar panels plus the cost of a new roof." Now, that is not great value for money, folks. I don't know what kind of what they're smoking out there in California, but that is not good value for money. The problem with the solar tiles is they're just not very efficient compared to solar panels. So they do look well. I don't mind the look of solar panels, to be completely honest, but some people do, and they're attracted to those solar tiles, but they're just very expensive. They're very low efficiency compared to solar panels, and they're very expensive to buy. So, and in my opinion, they're just too new as well. I mean, who knows what issues they might have down the road? This is a roof. I mean, roofs need to last 20 years. Um, so I'm just not convinced they're kind of ready for prime time yet, and they are very expensive compared to solar panels.
Okay, are there solar installers that will install on slate roofs, asks Nancy.
Nancy, I've never met one. Every time I've worked with a client who had a slate roof, the solar panel installers would just not do it. It's impossible to seal a hole through stone. So unfortunately, for people I know who have got slate roofs, they're often on like old farmhouses. And the two clients I've got who have slate roofs, they have big fields next to them, and they're actually planning on putting in a ground mounted array that would be in the field far away from the house, rather than using their roof.
Thank you. Oh, and here's a question I'm surprised didn't come up sooner. What about snow collection on a flat mounted array?
So the answer is yes. The snow does collect on the flat mounted array, just as it used to collect on the flat roof. And in the first year after I had the solar panels, I actually went up on the roof and swept off the solar panels to get my electricity back up. But then I did the calculations, and I was only saving about because the sun is low in the sky in the wintertime, you're just not making much electricity. So I was only making about $2 a day I was only saving about $2 a day by, sorry, no, I was only making about $2 a day by sweeping the snow off the panels. And that's less than minimum wage. So I decided not to do it anymore. So I just wait till the snow melts off.
But that might also suggest it you might want to pitch it a little bit too, wouldn't you? I mean, our sun isn't straight up in the sky anyway.
Yeah,
Even in solstice.
yeah, I think that's a very, very good idea, Claire, just to tilt the panels slightly. I would actually do it for a slightly different reason, which is that then the panels would be washed by the rain.
Right.
What happens with my panels is because they're flat, is the water evaporates in the summertime, leaving pollen on the solar panels, and that takes a few percent off the electricity being produced by the panel in summertime. So I actually asked my installer to install them with like a 1-inch tilt from one end to the other, and they wouldn't do it. They didn't have the racking system to be able to have one end higher than the other. So I just sort of accepted what it was. But I think that is a better way to do it, Claire, is to have them on a slight slope, not a 45-degree slope, because then you're shading the panel next to it, but enough of a slope to shed the water and maybe to shed the ice coming off it as well.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that the panels on Westwood High School are pitched.
Oh, they are. Okay, good.
Flat roof.
Well, my installer wouldn't do it, but I'm glad someone is. I do think it's a better solution.
Good. All right, let's see. And maybe we should go back to the heat pump question.
Well, let me just carry on. And we're not quite at the end yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought.
And then I'll show you in a minute. So now we've done the Fab Four: heat pumps, insulation, triple glazed windows, and solar panels. The trick to going zero carbon, zero bills, is to put it all together. And the real Fab Four, the Beatles on the album Yellow Submarine, sang all together now, which I will not sing for you because the singing gene skipped a generation in our family. I know this to be true, by the way. I did the 23andMe genetic analysis, and they actually said, you do not have the gene for singing in tune. So I'll definitely not be singing this for you. So putting it all together, let's look at for a minute at the cost for heating your house using different heating fuels. Everyone knows natural gas is the cheapest, heating oil is a bit more expensive, propane is a lot more expensive, and heating with direct resistance heating, like a fan heater or a electric baseboard heater, is the most expensive because electricity is 23 cents per kilowatt hour. And even if you use solar electricity at 7 or 8 cents a kilowatt hour, it's still more expensive than natural gas. Unless you use that solar electricity to power a heat pump. Remember, the heat pump heats with 2.5 times the efficiency of an electric resistance heater or a gas or oil-fired furnace. So now you're heating your house at maybe 2.5 or maybe less than 2 cents per kilowatt hour of heat in the house. So for the same amount of heat in the house, it's now costing you less than half what it costs to heat the house with natural gas. So while natural gas has historically been the cheapest way to heat your house, now it's different. Now solar panels on your roof plus a heat pump to heat your house is the cheapest way to heat your house at less than half the cost of heating with a fossil fuel furnace. This is how we heat our house today, and this is a big part of why our carbon footprint has gone down to zero and our bills have gone down to zero too. Now, in addition to all of that about money and carbon footprint, if anyone in your house has asthma, then replacing your fossil fuel furnace with a heat pump will greatly improve the indoor air quality. Because even when you have a properly vented furnace, there's still a little bit of burnt gas in the air in the house, which you're then breathing in. Now, if you're cooking on an induction stove, that will also greatly reduce the amount of particulates and nitric oxides and sulfur dioxide in the house. And our indoor air quality is measured using a sensor. It is from a company called Foobot, FOOBOT, costs about $100. And our air quality is consistently excellent. We have an induction stove, and we have no combustion in the house of fossil fuel because of the heat pumps for heating and the heat pump for the hot water tank as well. Now, that was the cost. What about the carbon footprint? The carbon footprint of natural gas, heating oil, and propane is all about the same, about half a pound of carbon dioxide for every kilowatt hour of heat. Utility electricity is a lot higher because the grid here in Massachusetts, we still burn heating, we still burn oil and natural gas to make the electricity. But of course, solar panels have a zero carbon footprint. So solar panels running a heat pump is now the cheapest way to heat your house at half the cost of natural gas, and it has a zero carbon footprint. Let me just take a bit of an aside here for a moment. So gasoline is also too expensive now to compete with solar panels and electric vehicles. Just yesterday, me and my wife drove to New York City and back. Our daughter's at Columbia University, and driving our Tesla, which we bought a year ago, it cost me $8. $8 for the round trip, and that's because my solar panels generate electricity at about 8 cents a kilowatt hour. The Tesla gets about 4 miles for every kilowatt hour, so about 2 cents per mile. My BMW, which it replaced, is about 15 cents per mile. A huge cut in the cost of driving. Even the Greyhound bus costs $26 to go from Boston to New York and back, and that emits carbon dioxide and pollutants every mile of the way, whereas the Tesla emits nothing. And so I really believe it is game over for the internal combustion engine. It's been nice knowing you. It's been great. It's powered the Industrial Revolution for 100 years, but it's now destined to go the way of the horse and carriage. Electric vehicles are just cheaper to own. They're a bit more expensive to buy right now, but they're coming down in price. But they're cheaper to own because there's no maintenance cost, and they're far cheaper to drive, particularly if you power them with electricity from rooftop solar panels, as we now do. So the key to going zero is to cut your house's energy use so much you can generate it all with solar panels from your roof, including the power needed to power an electric vehicle if you have one. So you cut it with insulation and air sealing, you cut it with triple glazed windows, you cut it with heat pumps, and then you generate it with solar panels on your roof. This both, by the way, is the optimal order. You may remember when I showed you at the start, we did it almost the opposite way around. We had solar panels and heat pumps first, then triple glazed windows, and the insulation was the last thing we did. But the better way to do it is in this order: insulation and air sealing first, triple glazed windows second, heat pumps third, and then you'll know how big to make your solar panel array to get it to a zero carbon footprint. Now let me just take a quick aside on health. This is the greenhouse gas emissions and the death rate from accidents and air pollution by different types of fuel. At the top, you can see the coal, oil, natural gas, and biomass, all with very large greenhouse gas emissions causing global warming, and all with very high death rates from accidents and air pollution. Look at the bottom four: hydropower, nuclear, wind, and solar, almost negligible. There's almost no greenhouse gas emissions from any of these, and there's almost no deaths from either industrial accidents or from the air pollution that they cause. So this health benefit of cutting your carbon footprint and cutting your bills. The health benefit is an additional benefit in addition to those two as well. Now, the journal Nature, which is the world's top scientific journal, stated in an article more than 5 million deaths per year are due to air pollution. So it's not just about cutting carbon footprints and cutting bills, it's also about the health of you and your family. Okay, let me get off my soapbox and get back to saving money. So let me just summarize where we've been today. These slides are in the book, so you don't need to write it all down. The total with saving was over $11,000 a year, and over 43 tons of carbon dioxide per year. These charts I mentioned are in the book. So you really can save money and helping to prevent global warming and to improve your health as well. Now, this was very clearly illustrated during the COVID lockdown. In the UK, the British Lung Foundation surveyed a bunch of people, 2 million people, and 2 million people have experienced improved lung function because of the reduced pollution from burning fossil fuels during the COVID lockdown. So if cutting carbon footprints was a drug, it would be instantly approved by the FDA. Why? Because it has widespread health benefits and zero side effects. It really is a wonder drug that should be prescribed for everyone. So in addition, this health burden tends to fall disproportionately on poor people, people of color, and those with disabilities. So by cutting your carbon footprint, by installing the Fab4, you can save money, save the earth from global warming, save lives, and even help to reduce inequality. So everyone really should be installing the Fab4. It delivers the the triple bottom line for the people: zero pollution for the people, zero carbon for the planet, and zero bills for your profit in your back pocket. So you can do this on your own home, or you can do it on new construction, as I mentioned. The financial summary, you can see again the investments on the left there, how long it takes to pay for itself, the return on investment. Overall, it's about $75,000, about 5% of the value of our house. Pays for itself in about 6 years with a 15% return on investment. So you really can cut your carbon footprint to zero, helping to reduce global warming. You can save money for a college, for retirement, for a vacation, whatever you want. We've been earning a much better return than in the stock market. And you can even increase the price of your house instantly. You do not need to wait for the payback period to get your money back. So zero carbon, zero bills, zero pollution. The healthy zero carbon future is here, but only if you actually do it. And the clock is ticking. So please start today. So, okay, so if you're convinced installing the Fab4 is going to help, then please go ahead and do so. Send me an email, because I'd like to gather stories of people who've making examples and leading by example. If you're intrigued but you need more time, please read the book. I'll give you the code in a minute. Actually, there's any of these codes will work. There's two different codes. This is left over from a previous presentation. But if you use the code GBM2, that will work to download the book. So just go to my website, order the book. Only the ebook works. It does not work if you order the printed version of the book. You have to pay for that if you want that version of the book. But the electronic book for Kindle or iPad is free. Just type in the code GBM2. Now, occasionally this does not work. So if it does not work, please email me and I will send you the file directly. But for most people, it works most of the time. So the code I meant to tell you is ZCA. It doesn't matter. Either code will work. ZCA will work, as will GBM2. It doesn't matter which one you use. Just order the iPad or Kindle version. There's a ton of other free stuff on my website, including the PDF file of these slides. There's a YouTube recording of a previous webinar. So if you want to go back and rehear something or listen to my answers to the questions, that you can do that. The free book's also available there. As I mentioned, the paperback is not free. Also, this special mini edition I did called Stuck at Home COVID-19 edition, you can get with the code COVID19, no spaces, or you can just email me with your questions if you want to, and I will write up the questions that are in the chat function here tonight, and I'll email it out to everyone within a few days of the webinar. So, Claire, why don't we, if you can just allow people to unmute themselves.
I have done that already.
You've done that already. All right, you're ahead of the game, Claire. Then,
Yep.
then people should just be able to unmute yourself, ask a question, and then please, once you've asked it, just put yourself back on mute so we don't hear the dogs barking and stuff like that.
You do have a couple of questions in the chat for
okay, let's do that. Yeah, let's do that first then.
Are there companies you don't recommend? I think that's regarding solar panels, and you did mention a couple.
Yeah. Do you want me
So
to go over those again?
I guess so, sure.
Okay, so the ones I would not recommend again would be solar flare and SGE, which stands for second generation energy. The ones I would recommend would be Great Sky and New England Clean Energy. And I think I'm missing one in there somewhere.
Okay,
But
I'm gonna type Revolution into the
yes,
chat.
yeah, do that. Yep.
Is good. And if anyone else has any, someone else had put in a recommendation up in the higher part of the chat. Okay, Ian Heller asks if she plans to remain in her home 10 more years, would it pay to do hits?
So yes, and is the short answer. Many of these things pay for themselves in much less than 10 years. The top candidate would be insulation and air sealing because it pays for itself so quickly. And on top of all that, Mass Save will probably pay for most of it anyway. So that is definitely the place to start. If you are replacing your windows, the additional cost of triple glazed above double glazed will pay for itself in about 5 years. The solar panels will pay for themselves somewhere in the 5-6 year range, and a heat pump will pay for itself probably in 9 or 10 years, unless you are replacing your AC units anyway. It's much better to think of a heat pump as being a replacement for failed AC units than is to think of it as being a replacement for a furnace, because it plugs into the same breakers in the electrical panel as your AC units, and it does do the AC in the summertime. It just reverses the circuit and does the heating in the wintertime. So if you do, if you're thinking about replacing your AC units, you might be looking at say 15,000 to replace a couple of outdoor condenser units, a couple of air handler units, and on like a 4,000 square foot home. So it might be something like $15,000. The additional cost of getting heat pumps rather than AC units might be 7,000. So it'd be at a total of maybe 23,000 for the heat pumps, 15,000 for the air conditioning units. So that additional cost, that $7,000 or $8,000 additional over the cost of the air conditioning units, will pay for itself very quickly in just about 3 or 4 years. And on top of that, the heat pumps qualify for the zero interest loan, whereas air conditioning units do not. And heat pumps qualify for a whole bunch of subsidies as well. So the net price of your heat pumps after the heat loan free financing, which is very valuable to you, and the subsidies will end up being just a few $1,000s, maybe $3,000 or $4,000 more than the cost of replacing your AC units. But now you're getting that zero carbon and much cheaper heating of your house too. So that would make it pay for itself much quicker. Now, on top of all of that, there are very large academic studies that show that the house price increases considerably by adding heat pumps and increases considerably by adding solar panels, more than the cost of installing those systems. So if you're actually thinking about dressing up your house for sale, rather than say putting in a new kitchen or repainting the house, you may well find that adding hits, heat pumps, insulation, triple glazed windows, and solar panels will actually do more to increase your house price than things like painting it or putting in a new kitchen.
Great. I got a direct message from Jerry. He has a pitched asphalt single roof. Would it make sense to put panels on the shady side? And I'm not sure if he means the north side or a side that has trees.
Okay, let's take both of those in turn. So if the house is unshaded by trees but has a north-facing slope, then the penalty in terms of how much less electricity you're going to get from the north slope compared to the south-facing slope is about 70%. No, sorry, that's not a penalty. You will get about 70% as much electricity from your north-facing roof as you will from your south-facing roof. That is much better than most people assume it is. In fact, it's much better than most solar installers assume it is, but it's nonetheless true. The penalty compared to a south-facing roof for a north-facing roof is only about 30%. So you'll generate about 70% as much solar electricity from the north-facing roof as a south-facing roof. East and west-facing roofs are only a 10% penalty to a sloped south-facing roof. And a flat roof is about a 10% penalty to a sloped south-facing roof as well. So anything of an east-facing roof, a south-facing roof, a west-facing roof and a flat roof will generate you solar electricity at very good, very cheap rates. The cheapest will be about 4 or 5 cents a kilowatt hour from a south-facing sloped roof, but the west-facing, the east-facing, and the flat roofs will only be about 6 or 7 cents a kilowatt hour, and even that north roof is going to be 9 or 10 cents per kilowatt hour. So still far less than paying for Eversource or National Grid electricity at 23 cents per kilowatt hour. Now that's the orientation. If you look at shade, even up to 50% shade, which is what my garage roof has, I'm still producing electricity at 11 cents per kilowatt hour there, compared to about 6 or 7 cents on the open roof of my flat roof, which is a sunnier location. 11 cents is still less than half the cost of utility electricity from Eversource or National Grid. So solar panels are very good value for money. They're very cheap. They're very heavily subsidized, even for north-facing roofs in full sun, or for any type of roof that's even in half shade.
Yes, we have some panels in shade, and they actually produce more when it's kind of cloudy out, because the sunlight gets kind of scattered, so it hits everything from a different angle, I guess. So we've had pretty good luck with that. I missed a question, a good question here from Marlena. What are the most efficient solar panels available as of now?
So let me answer that in two different ways, Marlena. The first one is the literal efficiency of converting sunlight into electricity, and that the highest commercially available efficiency is about 22%, and that's from sun power panels, which are made in the USA. Below that, there's a probably half a dozen manufacturers that are in the 20 to 21% range, and that would be Panasonic, Solaria, REC, and there's several others I'm just blanking on right now. But there's a lot of people in that kind of just behind the leader kind of pack, and then behind that there's a bunch of LG would be the other big one in that 20 to 21% range, and then below that there's a bunch of mostly Chinese companies, which are in the 15, 16, 17% range. They're much cheaper, but they're less efficient. So that's the literal physical efficiency of converting the energy in sunlight into the energy in electricity. What is more relevant for you, though, is the cost per kilowatt hour. And the most efficient panels are not the lowest cost per kilowatt hour. And often you'll find the latest generation panels, which are the most efficient, are very highly priced per kilowatt of installed power and per kilowatt hour of electricity they produce. And in fact, when I installed my second and third arrays, I did not buy the latest generation panels. All three of those arrays were from SunPower. But and when I did the array on my roof, which was the first array, I bought what was almost the latest generation panels, which was then 345 watts per panel. When I came to doing the second arrays about 18 months later, SunPower had a new panel with a 360 watt panel, which is the more efficient, more expensive one, but it was much more expensive per kilowatt hour. The 345 watt panel was now much cheaper per kilowatt hour. And they were actually phasing out a panel called the 327 watt panel. And I bought the 327 watt panel because although it was less efficient, it was much cheaper per kilowatt hour. So often you can get a much better deal by not going for the highest efficiency panel, but looking at the cost per kilowatt hour on the Energy Sage website from different types of panels, even from the same manufacturer. So I'd highly recommend you do that. You can get much better value for money by not picking the latest, greatest technology.
Thank you. We have SunPower on our roof too, and they're very good. And another good thing about them is SunPower wants them back, so they will recycle them at the end of their life. And I don't know about the other companies. I think Tesla does also. So that's a question that I get sometimes because I'm in the recycling business. So
okay.
All right, we got more questions. My goodness, this was so much engagement here. If Carolyn, my old friend Carolyn from Protest Days, if I want to increase my solar arrays beyond 10 kilowatts So I have to pay, do I have to pay commercial net metering rates? Is it worth it?
So
Oh,
if your array is less than 10 kilowatts, you automatically get 100% net metering. If your array is bigger than 10 kilowatts, then the amount over 10 kilowatts gets you 60% of the net metering rate. So the net metering rate for less than a 10 kilowatt array is 100% of the electricity price you're paying. So you get a 23 cents per kilowatt hour credit for every kilowatt hour you export to the grid, if you're less than 10 kilowatts on the size of your array. If you're over 10 kilowatts on the size of your array, suppose you're 15 or 20 kilowatts, which is a good sized array, probably 40 panels to get to that size, then you're going to be getting 60% of the credit for the kilowatt hours you produce over the baseline. Now, this is a very complicated calculation. It's done every month, month to month. And if you do the averages, which I've done, the average works out at about 3 cents per kilowatt hour, less than the full rate. So below 10 kilowatts of electricity power on your array, you'll be getting 23 cents per kilowatt hour. If you've got a 15 or 20 kilowatt array, it's going to be more like 20 cents per kilowatt hour, not 23 cents per kilowatt hour. So it's still a very good subsidy. It's still very generous, and you're going to be producing electricity at very cheap rates compared to paying for utility electricity, but it's not quite as good as it is below 10 kilowatts.
might be a good argument for getting a battery and sucking that energy and using it when you need it instead of pulling it in from the grid.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Claire, that a larger array, like say 15 or 20 kilowatts, pairs very well with a battery, because the battery subsidy under the SMART program is calculated based off the kilowatt hours you produce on your array. This is why installing a battery without an array doesn't make sense. You need to install a battery with an array, because the battery subsidy is based off the kilowatt hours of electricity produced by your array. So the larger the array, the more subsidy you get. And this is why pairing a battery, which is exactly what I'm about to do, pairing a battery with a large array makes the battery almost free.
Excellent. Now maybe we'll try that too. Fran Campion asked me, he direct messaged me, question, can heat pumps be installed to heat my house through the ducts and vents of my central air system? He currently has baseboard radiators and not forced hot air, but he does have central air.
Yeah, yes is the short answer, Fran. In fact, if you have baseboard radiators today for your heating, and you have ductwork for your AC, what you would do is install the heat pumps to run through the ductwork. So now your heat pumps are producing warm air coming through the ductwork in winter and cool air coming through the ductwork in summertime. And you leave in place your fossil fuel furnace with your water-based radiators running around the baseboards for those days in winter when the heat pumps can't keep up. And they almost certainly won't be able to keep up all year round when we have those bitterly cold days in winter when it's 0 degrees Fahrenheit outside. You'll need some kind of backup heating. You can get backup electrical heating elements to go with your forced hot air system, and they do work, and they will keep your house warm, but they're really expensive because you're now burning electricity at 23 cents per kilowatt hour. It's much cheaper to burn some fossil fuel at maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 cents per kilowatt hour of heat in the house. So that's what we did. We kept our fossil fuel furnace in place. We use it about 20 days a year when it's bitterly cold outside, and the rest of the year we have a 0 carbon footprint.
Wow. We have ductless mini splits here. We don't use the duct. We took out our ducts. And we've never actually, I think only once or twice have we had to go to our oil furnace. It actually was surprisingly efficient to get down to the lower temperatures. So the trick is finding somebody to service them. We've had a little issue with that. So say the questions keep coming in. Wow. Let's see. Regarding window inserts for single panes is from Mary Joyce. For single panes, what are they made of? Glass, and how do they attach?
So you can get them made of polycarbonate plastic or acrylic plastic, both of which are very clear. The acrylic, as I mentioned, does tend to yellow a bit over time if it's left in the sun. So I prefer the polycarbonate over the acrylic, but I prefer the glass over the plastic because you can get the low E coatings on the glass. And also I think glass just looks nicer. It's what you expect to see in a window frame, whereas a sheet of polycarbonate is going to move a little bit if there's a strong breeze, or if someone closes the door, the window is going to move a little bit. So I just think the glass looks better. And they're fitted into the window frame with there's usually a rubber gasket around the outside, or sometimes it's just foam. It's a strip of like half-inch thick foam around the outside, and you just push fit it into the window. And the friction between the window insert and the frame is enough to hold it in place.
Sounds elegant. Roy Rodenstein, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I shouldn't have even tried. Solar, regarding solar, one, my house already had solar. It has 28 panels, but looks like 10 more would fit. Do you need a lot of clearance to the edge of the roof, or each roof section, or did they not install as many as might fit? I would invite him to my house. We have a split level here, and maybe I'll contact you offline if you can come take a look. Number two, this is just on the south-facing side. Is it worth it to install panels on the east-west facing roofs? Absolutely. Come to my house. I'll email you. I'll private chat you my address, and you could see what we've done here. And David, do you have any comments on that?
No, I completely agree with what Claire is saying. East and west facing roofs are actually very good. Some solar panel installers don't seem to get this, and they think that unless it's a sloped south facing roof, they're not going to do it. But from your point of view, you are saving a lot of money with an east or west facing roof. Your cost per kilowatt hour will only go up 10% compared to the optimal of a south-facing sloped roof. So if the south-facing sloped roof produces power at, say, 5 cents per kilowatt hour, your east and west facing roofs are going to produce power at maybe 6 cents per kilowatt hour. That is still 1/4 of the. There you go. Claire's put her arrays up behind her there, so you can see.
Yes, can you see the picture? I see. Okay, now that I'm talking, I'm going to get out of the way. Oh, my green screen isn't working here. So that's we have 3 rows on the back side of the roof that you can't see of solar panels. So we have a total of 34 or 39. I think it's 39 now. But yeah, they had to work around the slants there. And you know, when you have things sticking up like the vent pipes and things, they have to work around those as well.
Yeah, so I would suggest figuring out how many more panels you can get on your roof is something I can't do. You'd have to get a contractor to come and take a look at it, because some contractors do require clearance around the edge simply for installation. They just don't want their workers working that close to the edge of a roof. So that's something that some people will do, some people will not. And then, as Claire says, if you've got obstructions like a stink pipe or a chimney vent, those need to be worked around as well. So the only way to really answer your question is to actually get a contractor to come and take a look at your roof.
Good. One more message. Hang on. Fran Campion. For those who can't get solar panels on their roof, can you recommend community solar options?
Yes, and I do. That's a very good question, Fran. So some people, despite what I've said about west-facing roofs and even north-facing roofs and even shady roofs, some people just can't get solar panels on their roof because it's just too shady, or they just don't like them, or perhaps their roof is slate and they can't put them on the roof. So for those people, what's the next best option? The next best option is to use community solar. And community solar is where somebody, a farmer, usually, has a vacant field and they fill it with solar panels somewhere within the Eversource grid area. So for instance, I have just bought a 12,000 kilowatt hour per year supply from a solar panel farm in Falmouth, Massachusetts. And they've just built a big solar farm with thousands of solar panels in the field, and they sell me the credits at a 12.5% discount to the Eversource list price. So instead of me paying Eversource, I now pay the credits to the company. The company's called NextAmp, N-E-X-T-A-M-P. They're currently offering about a 12.5% discount to the Eversource list price. There are other community solar companies as well. I'm not familiar with them, but they're offering about 10%. So I went with the better deal. The reason I did that is because at our rental house, we have a very obstructed roof. It's got dormers that really break up the roof from a solar panel point of view, and it also has a lot of shade. So it was actually better for me to buy the next best thing, which is the community solar at a 12.5% discount. That's 100% solar panels, 100% solar electricity, so it's a zero carbon footprint, and it's all made in Massachusetts. So you don't have to wonder about whether these Texas wind farms are sort of really producing the zero carbon electricity for you. It's right here in Massachusetts, and it's a 12.5% discount to Eversource or National Grid. So if you can't do solar, or the paperwork is just looking like too much for you, even though it's a lot cheaper, this community-oriented solar is a very good fallback option for those people who can't do rooftop solar.
Excellent. I don't see any more questions. Would anyone like to pipe up and verbally ask David a question?
On my screen, Claire, I can see that Mary Joyce has a hand up.
Oh, I can't see that. Hang on a second. All right, Mary, go ahead. You can unmute yourself and
there you go.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Claire. And thank you, David. I already had my question asked. I had my hand raised to ask the question about the single inserts in Windows.
Oh, very good. That's right.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was able to answer your question, Mary.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Great. Well, we've gone a little bit over time. I didn't think we were going to get it all done in an hour, David. When you said an hour, I'm like, I don't think so.
I get the presentation done in an hour, so if people need to leave, they can leave. But I always stay on as long as people want to ask questions.
Okay, and I did forget to mention before we had Mary speak that this is being recorded. And the recording will be available on the League of Women Voters website. I should probably put that in the chat. Let's see. So, does anybody else have anything they would like to ask or say?
Claire, there are two more people who have questions that they want to ask.
Okay, David, can you? I'm looking for a link here.
I can see the hand is raised by Roy Rodenstein, Mary Joyce, and Barry Ormland.
Okay, maybe it's Barry. Copy. I don't think I've had a question from Barry that I've voiced.
Okay, thank you.
Barry,
Yes, thank you, David. A wonderful talk. Thanks for sharing so much with us.
You're welcome.
But I want to ask for instance, when you were asked about which facing north southeast would be most economical or better solar panels, and you gave cents per kilowatt for each way that they would face, but I don't understand how you are calculating cents per kilowatt when it seems to me once you've installed your panels, it costs $0 per watt.
Yeah, so Barry, I wasn't actually saying cents per kilowatt, which is the installed power of the array. I was saying cents per kilowatt hour of the electricity produced by the array. In one sense, you're absolutely right. The power costs nothing because you're not paying anyone in cash for the electricity. The way I calculate those numbers is to take the cost of the array, so after the subsidies. So you may remember on my example, it was $56,000 was the gross price. That was the check I wrote to the installer, less the federal subsidy, less the state subsidy, gave me the net price of about $15,000 if I remember. I took that net price and I divided that by the number of kilowatt hours of electricity that the array will produce over its 25-year guarantee period, because the manufacturers guarantee the power output for 25 years. So I took the guaranteed power output and then divided the cost by the number of kilowatt hours being produced over the 25-year warranty period, and that gave me a cost per kilowatt hour of electricity produced, and those are roughly 5 cents per kilowatt hour for a south-facing sloped roof, say 6 cents per kilowatt hour for an east-facing or a west-facing sloped roof, and maybe 7 cents or 8 cents per kilowatt hour for a sloped north-facing roof. The flat roof would be about 6 or 7 cents per kilowatt hour, as well as the east and the west-facing roofs. So that's how I was working it out, Barry. I was doing the net cost of the array divided by its guaranteed production of electricity over 25 years.
That's very clear. Yes, that's very clear now. Thank you, David.
Okay.
Yep, I've always get confused with the kilowatts versus the
I know
kilowatt.
it is very confusing, which is why I try to actually reduce everything to money, because that avoids talking about kilowatts or kilowatt hours or BTUs or therms or thousands of cubic feet of natural gas. Like, it's just too confusing. Just talk about dollars and cents.
Well, I think, is there a company you recommend to install AC heat pumps?
So my heat pumps, both the ones for my house and the ones for our rental property, were installed by Rodenheiser, which is a well-known HVAC contractor around these parts. I do think they're very good. They're very technically knowledgeable. They are a bit on the expensive side. So I think that they're sort of the safe bet. There are plenty of other companies. There's a company called New England Ductless, which obviously by its name is more suited to ductless installations, like the Mitsubishi ductless heat pumps I showed you at our rental property. But they do actually install ducted systems as well as ductless systems. But I found those have been pretty good, reliable installers. There are plenty of others. Muirfield Mechanical, I've heard good things about, but I've not used them myself. But I have got direct experience both Rodenheiser and New England Ductless. Claire, I think it'd be a good idea. If anyone does have good or bad experience, please put it in the chat, because I do think it's very important that we sort of share these stories, because one of the most challenging parts of all of this, I've given you the recipe, right? I've given you the recipe for how to do this, but you still got to find a contractor. And that's a big barrier for a lot of people. They know they want to do something, and now hopefully I've been able to show you these are the right things to do. They're going to make you money, save you a lot of carbon footprint, save you a lot of money, but then you still got to find someone to call. So I think it'd be very useful, Claire, if you can just ask people to just give us your names, give us the names of anyone who's good or bad, let us know, and let's share that information, because it's a very important step in doing this.
Claire?
Absolutely. Yeah. Hi, Nancy. Yep.
So David, did I understand you basically a solar panel will last about 25 years? Is that what you meant by the warranty?
No, what I mean is the power output is guaranteed by the manufacturer. So it's like having a 25-year warranty on a car.
Okay.
Now, no one gives you a 25-year warranty on a car, right? But the solar panels are warranted by the manufacturer to produce, it's about 90% of their initial electricity over 25 years.
So you would replace panels how often?
No, see, once you paid for them, they're just going to produce electricity. So,
Oh, so
I would just leave them there. I mean,
they don't wear out or anything?
They get very slightly worse each year, but it's about 0.5% per year. So even in their 25th year, they're going to be producing about 90% of what they produced in their first year. And
Oh, okay.
Point, they're no longer warranted at that point, but just leave them on the roof. If they break,
oh,
well, then you replace them. But they'll probably carry on for another 10, 15 years. At that point, your electricity is like totally free. So why not just have it? I wouldn't replace them unless they break.
I understand. Okay, I misunderstood. Somebody else had said, yeah, but you've got to replace them all the time. And so that's not true.
Not true at all. No.
No.
I've had a couple break and they were replaced under the warranty.
Well, sure.
So
thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So Claire, Roy Rudenstein wanted to ask a question. He had his hand up for a time.
Go ahead, Roy. You gotta unmute.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you so much. I had another follow-up on solar. So as I mentioned, my house has some panels installed on south facing. I have some east-west that are not installed, and I probably need to replace my roof in the next few years anyway. Does anybody have any experience with something like the Tesla solar roof?
I'd be very surprised, Roy, if anyone around here has experience with the Tesla solar roof, because it's, Tesla's a California company, and the only installations I know of are in California, and they've all been done by Tesla employees. So I just don't think they're available here on the East Coast yet. And even if they were, I would be very skeptical, because I mentioned that Tesla engineer who installed them on the roof of his house said they were very good value for money. They're only 35% more than solar panels. It doesn't make any sense to me. And unless you absolutely want that look, and I get that, some people don't like the look of solar panels, that's totally fine. In which case it may work for you, but they're going to be more expensive than solar panels. And so it's also a very new technology. I mean, Elon Musk has a tendency to exaggerate the benefits of his products. So I would personally, I would consider it maybe 5 years from now, when they're kind of proven, there's some track record. But right now, I think you're taking quite a big risk. That's a lot of money to put into a roof. And if it doesn't work, you're stuck with it.
Right.
So I would just go with, just like Claire's background picture there, or my picture. If it's a flat roof, just put them on with a ballasted system. If it's a sloped roof and it's standing seam, just bolt them on the panel, on the standing seam. If it's like asphalt shingles, just penetrate the roof, but make sure you get the roof penetration warranty from the installer.
If anyone else has anything to say, just unmute and pipe right up, and we'll probably wrap it up soon, right, David?
Sure, yeah.
Hi, I have a quick question. Again, I'm the one from Arizona. So my question is it better to do, being that I have full sun area, my roof is southwest facing, fully exposed, is it better to go with a smaller unit, which would cost me less, but take, reduce, part of my electric use that I would use from the grid? Or should I go bigger and spend more money and always be pumping back into the grid and never really have to worry about paying an electric bill from the electric company?
So I'm extremely rational about these things, and I do everything based off the economic analysis. I would suggest you do the same thing, but there are certainly people who put big arrays on their roofs because they like the fact that they're contributing zero carbon power to the grid. So if you want to do that, I'm not going to argue against it. It's good for everyone to do that. But if you want to do the economically rational approach, I would ask the installers to give you the cash flow forecasts for those different scenarios. I think if you're in Arizona and you've got a full sun on your roof, you're going to be able to produce a lot of power. You've got a very long sunny season in Arizona, and you said it was a southwest facing roof, so you're going to get a very, very good solar production. So I would, if you talk to solar installers or use the Energy Sage website, they will calculate all this for you. They will calculate from your electricity bill how many panels you need. Now that is done off your today's electricity bill. What I would encourage you to think about is tomorrow's electricity bill. So think about if you add an electric vehicle. And in my opinion, everyone will be adding electric vehicles sometime in the next 5 to 10 years. When your car is finally up for renewal, getting a new internal combustion engine is going to look very, very costly and very pollutanty, if that's the right word, compared to buying an electric vehicle. So what I would do in your situation, I would plan ahead a bit and say, well, what are my electric needs going to be in the future? Maybe if you replace your AC units when they break with heat pumps. I know you don't need much heat in winter in Arizona, but you need some. It gets cold at night in Arizona in the wintertime. So you need some heating system. So I would look ahead and say, how much electricity am I going to need if I put heat pumps in to replace my air conditioning units? And how much more electricity will I need to charge a electric vehicle? And then put in an array to meet all those electric needs. And solar panel installers, certainly around here, are not very good at that. They'll like look at your electric bill and say, okay, you need to offset your electric bill, and here's the array that will do it. But in Arizona, with so much sun, you can produce a lot of electricity from your roof, and I suggest you then use it. You use it with an electric vehicle. Your car will be so cheap to drive based off your solar panels, and your heating will be so cheap with a heat pump. But don't go out and buy one today. Go out and get one when you replace your air conditioning units. Get a heat pump, it will air conditioning in the summertime, it will heat in the wintertime, and now powered by your solar panels generating very cheap power for you. You will have a zero carbon footprint on your house and your transportation, your cars, and it will cost you far less money than your current electric bill payments.
Yeah, we actually just replaced both of our air conditioning units this year, at the beginning of the year. Put two brand new 3-ton units in the house, and we're actually looking to get an electric car probably in the next month. So we're trying to do all of these things this year. We've made a lot of changes. So I was just wondering about how much I should put on the roof. But you mentioned thinking ahead with the electric car, and I had not thought of that. So I think going bigger would be better in our situation.
Yeah, so just roughly, if you're driving, say, 10,000 miles a year in your electric vehicle, a Tesla will get about 3 miles per kilowatt hour. And most other electric vehicles are maybe around around 2.5 miles per kilowatt hour. So to drive 10,000 miles a year, you're going to need, let's just call it 3,000 kilowatt hours. And where you are in Arizona, you're going to be generating at least 1,000 kilowatt hours per kilowatt of installed power. So you need about a 3 kilowatt array to power your car, roughly. So you might need, I don't know, maybe you need 10, 12, 15 kilowatts to power your house with its current heating, with its current electrical load. But you'll need about another 3,000 kilowatt hours, or about another 3 kilowatt array. And a 3 kilowatt array would be about 7 panels. So just roughly, those would be the numbers. And just look at your roof and say, can you get 7 more panels in? If you can, I would do it, because it will save you so much money on your on gasoline.
All right, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
May I just add something?
Yeah.
I'm just concerned because as far as I know, I don't think every state offers net metering at all. And some of them might offer net metering and not subsidies, or higher or lower subsidies. So it's good to find out what you are allowed to do there.
Yeah, so what you're absolutely right. So what I would do is go to www.dsireusa.org, DSIRE. I think I might have just said that wrong. It's desireusa.org. It was in the presentation earlier. I'm sorry. So if you just go to Google and search for DSIRE, you'll find it. That will put up the website that has all of the subsidies listed state by state. So you look up the Arizona subsidies. Arizona does probably not have as high subsidies as Massachusetts. The East and the West Coast tend to have the highest subsidies. The center of the country does not have as high subsidies. But you certainly get the federal tax credit. The federal tax credit is across the whole country. That's 26% of the cost of the array. I don't know what the local Arizona state subsidy is, if there is one. And net metering, as that gentleman just pointed out, net metering is very generous in Massachusetts, even with that 60%, they call it market net metering for a greater than 10 kilowatt system. It's still very generous. And some states have much less generous net metering arrangements, where, for instance, some states only allow you to get about half of the price back for every. So if you're paying 15 cents per kilowatt hour in Arizona, which is probably about what you're paying, you might only get 7 cents back. whereas in Massachusetts, we're paying 23 cents and you get 23 cents back. So yeah, you're right. You need to look at that net metering policy. So I'm afraid these things are a bit more complicated than you'd like. But that is another reason to use the Energy Sage website, because all these things are calculated for you, including the net metering subsidy and including the local subsidies for Arizona. So I definitely recommend you go there and just put in your electric bill, add on 3,000 kilowatt hours a year for your electric vehicle, and you'll at least be in the ballpark.
Hi, this is Jan Galkowski. I just wanted to make a comment about that net metering thing. When Claire and I put our panels on, of course, in Massachusetts, so the net metering is very generous. One of the things that we thought about was, well, what happens if Massachusetts net metering policy gets worse in 10 years, and how would we respond to that? And I think that what we figured out was that what we would do is we would try to go as big as possible on the solar, and we try to couple that with battery storage, anticipating that the battery storage would be cheaper. And the idea would be then to be as independent of the grid as possible, because what we're doing essentially right now is we're using the grid as a big battery of,
Yep.
in a kind of a way.
Yeah.
And so that's, you know, if the net metering gets worse, you basically try to get it off the grid as much as you can.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Jan. And I actually think you're right. I think net metering will get worse over time. It's not really sustainable for the electric utility companies to be paying you 23 cents for every kilowatt hour you produce from your solar panels. But when they can buy that electricity from a power station for 10 or 12 cents per kilowatt hour. So it's a very generous subsidy today, probably going to decline over time. So assuming it does, I would agree with you, Jan. The thing to do is get a battery and use that, for instance, to charge the battery from your solar panels during the day rather than export it to the grid, and then use the battery to charge your car overnight.
Excellent. All right, one more question here. I think we probably should wrap it up soon. Another one from Fran. How hard is it to monetize the solar credits in Massachusetts? Will credits be rising in value in coming years? That's a good question.
So Fran, the